Hi, this is Rob from the RAID Studio, and you are listening to the True North Country Comics Podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Rob Coughler about the Kickstarter anthology RAID.world. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. It's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. I invite you to like and subscribe. Rob is based in Toronto, Ontario. His role at RAID Studio encompasses operations director, editor, contributor, writer, and much more. With a history in film and acting and a background in children's literature, Rob has brought his storytelling expertise to help Canadian creatives refine their stories and connect them with their audience through RAID Studio and its publications. The Royal Academy of Illustration and Design, aka RAID, is an award-winning artist collective located in Toronto's historic Parkdale. With a primary focus on comics and graphic novels, RAID is a creative ecosystem where artists can build their ideas, collaborate, and access varied expressive platforms. RAID.world is a dynamic, new genre-driven volume from the unhinged imaginations of international creators. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Rob Coughler about the Kickstarter anthology RAID.world. So, Rob Coughler, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Oh, you're welcome.
I appreciate your time. What I usually do to start off the interview is ask the creator about their first comic book. So I'm wondering if you remember, what was the first comic book that you read?
Honestly, trying to remember the first one I ever read is so hard. I just remember going to this little drug mart that we had in the small town I grew up in and just grabbing what was available off the shelves because it wasn't like we got them in regular sequence. I do remember a lot of Detective, Batman, that kind of stuff. That was what I was drawn to in the beginning. But I think, like, if I think about the one that sticks with me as a series that really I read and like kind of stuck in my brain afterwards, it was The Death of Spider-Man with Craven's Last Hunt.
Oh, right. That was a classic one for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's out of all, like, I know I was reading before then, but the last thing I remember that this really stuck out was that for sure.
Yeah. Cool. So good books to talk about then, but I'm wondering who or what inspires you to create today?
Right now, I find just the group of people that I'm working with here at the RAID Studio. We are constantly discussing different ideas and different projects, and it just makes your mind start to work and the gears start to turn so that you kind of get these little ideas in your own head. I mean, there's a lot of great content out there in the world, but if you spend too much time just absorbing that, I find you spend less time creating your own.
Okay, that's a fair answer for sure. Now, you just mentioned my next question is your role there at RAID Studio. I'm wondering if you could walk me through exactly what you're doing there. Maybe just how do you interact with your colleagues there? How does that work on a daily basis?
Well, for me, my official title is the Chief Operations Officer. It's kind of like the step below the CEO, where the CEO is the person who has a lot of the ideas and the directions and stuff, and the CEO is the person who tries to implement those plans and actions. I'm also running the day-to-day operations. You probably know we've done a few publishing titles recently, and we ran Kickstarter programs, and so there's a lot of stuff on the fulfillment end or getting the programs ready and the different projects ready that I will be in part of. Also with our RAID titles that we've been publishing, I'll do a lot of editing on those ones. I did story editing on the first, second, and third, and coming up on this fourth one as well. So that's kind of what I do for that thing. Also helping out with a lot of the just day-to-day operations of keeping track of some of the finance stuff with Ramon as my overseer.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like it takes a lot of your time trying to keep everything in track. So I guess there's very little time to throw around the football and knock ideas around. And sort of
Yeah, no, because with that, we also have like other projects that are not mainly comics related, but we have just other, what you'd say, projects on the go that I kind of do project management on too, with back and forth emails. So that does take a lot of the time out of the day too.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize the behind the scenes business of running a studio and making a comic book. It's one thing to have an idea, but there's a lot of different facets in enabling, all the creators to get their work out the door and to get it to public and that sort of thing. And that's a tough job to do.
Well, I mean, even if like Ramon does a lot and has a lot on his plate as well as the CEO, but if he had to spend half his day just doing all the mailing and that stuff too for fulfillment for half of these books, it would just eat up his entire life.
Right. You hinted about this next question, which is your current project. It's called RAID.world. And I wonder if you could
Yes.
talk a wee bit about it, maybe what it's all about, and what is your contribution to that book as well?
So I'd mentioned before we had our RAID anthology series. We've had 3 already successful books, and this is our 4th one that we are, for the first time, launching it through a Kickstarter platform. The other ones had all been self-published, self-financed, but this is the one we're crowdsourcing for the first time. So for this one, my role with this one has been, of course, editing again and helping with getting the page set to go. But I also had a story I wrote for this one called Rest Home Revenge. So I wrote it, and it was drawn by Damien Canta. He's been here for a couple years now at the studio, and when it came time to do this one, we both kind of thought, hey, let's give a shot at this. And the story behind it is if there's a rest home with a bunch of ill-treated patients, and something akin to a super soldier serum came to them instead of their heart meds.
Oh my, yikes.
So what would ensue? What kind of chaos? So it's a bit of a kind of a creepy horror type story.
Uh-huh. Now, can you walk me through the collaboration process with your artist there? Like, did you have the idea already done, the script layout, and said, go do it? Or was it a back and forth sort of project?
I mean, I always had these little snippets idea. I always thought this would be a hilarious, like, fighter game, like Street Fighter kind of thing, where you'd have these people against orderlies and using their various, like, walkers as a, almost like a pommel horse to do spinning kicks around at people, stuff like that. And there was another creator, Dinesh, who was in the studio, and he was looking for an idea and wanted to hear some of mine. And he already had another project he was working on. So when I had been talking about them, Damien had mentioned that he had a bit of an interest of drawing something as well. So I said, well, I got this one here. It's a half idea, but I can script it out really quickly and we can move on from there. And so that's what I did, and just like kind of let him fly with the creative side for the art, giving just like a note here or there to keep it moving forward. But he grasped it quite easily and did a great job.
Great. Now you mentioned that you're overseeing the entire production of the book. I guess there's a lot of herding cats, so to speak, where you've got to get people's schedules online. And how does that work, though? Like, it's bad enough just trying to get one story done, but you've got multiple stories in this anthology. How does that work?
A lot of emails, like a lot of emails. Luckily, there's a lot of people who work in this studio as well, but I'll do a lot more of the story editing, and then Ramon also is the editor for more of like the story and visual stylings. Ramon's really good at doing the layouts and catching things that will help the story like flow smoother just by a little tweak here or there, or shifting where a panel's focus is. And trying to get everybody on time is where the struggle comes in, especially going through what we had last year, or the last 2 years technically now with the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of people who were no longer in the studio every day. They were at home, and so it wasn't like we had that constant interaction to help push each other forward. One of the great things about having a studio like this is that you can have some work and show it to your neighbor and say, hey, look at this, what do you think, and get input and feedback, and it can really help you grow and really get some work established. But if all your partners are locked at home, it's a little bit harder. We tried some Zoom meetings and stuff, just like everybody else in the world had, and
Right.
that helps, but it's just not the same.
No, that's for sure. You can't like throw something at someone and say, "Hey, get back to work."
Yeah, we have Nerf dart guns at the office.
Ah, there you go. Yes. Yes, I remember those days. So how long would you say this is taking to put an anthology book together? I mean, traditionally as you said, you've done this 3 times before, and this is the 4th time. Is it a set period of time, or do you just let it go until it's done, or how does that work?
We give ourselves kind of a time frame. We had been looking at doing these before with a release schedule coinciding with comic book conferences, but or conventions, I should say. But with the pandemic as it was, suddenly that became not the same focus because there wasn't any. And so that's when we started looking at the Kickstarter model and realized that, well, everyone's at home, no one's doing this. So if we do it, we can sell from this platform. And so it kind of changed our timeline. And because we were also having to redirect our thoughts on how we ran it, we did postpone a little bit longer than we would have normally had hoped for. But I think it's going to be for the better for sure. We spent a lot of time trying to get this look right. We're also putting a couple little bells and whistles onto the whole platform that will be a fun surprise for everybody who decides to pledge.
Sure. Yeah. Typically with Kickstarters, there's incentives. Are there any sort of levels that you're applying to this project where people can get perhaps a signed poster or whatever? How did you work through that?
Well, we're trying to keep a lot of the incentives and the stretch goals to stuff that brings a better product. So it's more about getting a better quality paper, spot gloss, French flaps, and stuff like that, just to make a nicer book. Because it's one of the things that we are really proud of is everything we've put out has looked fantastic, and that's what we're trying to focus on. There are other things, but we kind of have to hold those closer to the vest until it actually comes to release time.
So we've talked about RAID.world, the anthology project. But do you have any other upcoming projects that you can talk about?
At the moment, for myself personally, not. But for Raid itself, I have a very full plate. Our publishing list this year, we're looking at doing another Forest Folk volume to coincide with the first volume by Dasgardine. I know Ramon is looking at his Kookaberry option. It's his online comic. If you've heard of that one before, he is planning to release it this year as a collection. So there's a few things down the pipe that we are quite proud of putting out there, and we can't wait to start getting right into it and moving on to the next cool project. There's some other stuff too coming out later in the year, which are also a surprise, but I'm sure it will garner a lot of interest from people when they see them.
Sure, absolutely. Now I know that there's hints that events might come back to normal, so to speak. I know that TCAF is usually a very big one for you and your team, and I'm sure everyone's looking forward to it. I think that's moved out to June, but in general, though, is that something that you're looking forward to, you and your RAID studio, to get out and see the people who are reading your books? Is that something you're looking forward to this year?
Yeah, I mean, we did have a small taste of it this past Fan Expo. Their one little short one they had while there was a small window, and it was good just going out and seeing the fans again for the first time, and which seemed like ages. It feels good to be able to come back with something new to put in their hands. So last time we had the Forest Folk, and that was a great jump into that realm. And then this one coming forth, we just are going to focus on the next show when it comes in, and hopefully we get to have full capacity in all these large crowds again, because that's where we get to see the most people and do the best business.
Sure, absolutely. So we talked about a lot of stuff going on, and you hinted about some stuff coming down the road. But where do you recommend that people go to find out more about RAID Studio online and through social media?
Well, for most of our books, if you want to take a look at what we have for offerings, we have raidpress.com. It's from there, it's our online web store where you can catch some of our past titles and our most recent publishing titles. There's also some that are there for pre-order. We did our first actual novel publication this year with Sheldon Carter from Digital Extremes in London, Ontario, and he also co-writes Arden with Eric Vetter in our anthology series. And so that just finished for a very successful campaign. And so now if anyone wants it and is curious because they missed it, it's available on the site. We also have the RAID Studios on Twitter and Instagram as well. So those are also a great way to catch us. And hopefully soon we'll be relaunching on our RAID TV YouTube channel, the Make Shit Mondays, pardon the French, with Eric Vetter and Ramon Perez, where we discuss creativity and the things that drive us to create.
Very good. Good stuff. Well, Rob, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering if there's something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview.
Well, I mean, if you are in the Toronto area, there was a lot of stuff that was shut down, but the one thing that stayed open for us is our front cafe, where we have different arts posted up for people to take a look at in our gallery space. And it's right now we have some heritage Canadian comics called the Trailblazers series, and you can find us at 1720 Queen Street West in Toronto, Ontario. And come free to check us out Monday to Friday and on the weekends, as long as you're in here around 9 to 5, you can catch that and get a good coffee and empanada from the Amazon Cafe.
Thanks to Rob for the chat. You can discover more about RAID.world on Kickstarter, and you can discover more about RAID Studios at RAID.world. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Don't forget to check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2022.